Hello and welcome to the Holistic Pathway, the unscripted conversations on mind, body, spirit, and entrepreneurship, a brand new video series where we dive deep into the holistic integration of life and business. I am Tammy Korin, your holistic alchemist, changing pain into possibilities and possibilities into purpose. Today we have a special guest named Andrea Korin, and she is here with us as your trusted guide on transformative journeys towards self-discovery and empowerment. Andrea is the go-to person who specializes in helping individuals illuminate their shadows, activate their true selves, and live a life filled with purpose and authenticity. In her own words, I will show you how to work and take advantage of your own multi-dimensionality, so you can live in optimal bliss and flow. Years ago, Andrea used to believe that all the answers resided within, but after a prolonged quest for external validation, she realized the importance of going back to basics, embracing her individuality. Andrea embarked on a profound journey of self-exploration, discovering that her strengths were concealed within her fears and shadows, those blind spots we all carry. Andrea understands that our inner guidance and spirit team are our most reliable allies on our life's path. She believes that each person is a magical being brimming with light and wisdom. Unfortunately, many have forgotten their true essence due to conditioning, limitations, and the suppression of their genuine emotions as a protective measure against the world. Andrea's mission is to assist you in healing and empowering yourself. She excels in recognizing and debunking limiting beliefs while shedding light on your shadows, enabling you to lead the life you've always dreamt of with ease and flow. To Andrea, the world is inherently magical, just as you are. So thank you, and join us for today's conversation. All right, so here we go. So Andrea, it's funny. I think we met online around the Periscope days, right? Around 2015.
Yeah.
What a crazy, crazy ride this has been. So, as we talked about, this is just an unscripted conversation. So we're just see how it goes. So what's on your mind today? How are things going for you? Tell me more about your journey.
Oof, that's that can be a lot. Um, so we met online, you are correct. I was in a very much different career path back then. You were already in the whole holistic thing. I was on the corporate world, very different from what I am right now.
Yeah.
Um, I did have, of course, I did have an incline, for everything that was like holistic, spiritual, all that, all that world. But I think that it was kind of like very, very dormant in me.
Yeah.
As with most people.
Absolutely.
So my background is really in hospitality. So I work in hospitality in every field that you can imagine. But mostly I ended up being kind of like behind the scenes, like the strategic part of hospitality.
Okay.
So I always been surrounded, looking back, I always been surrounded by diversity, by different cultures, by travel. That's really like what, like, I guess, like lights me up in a way, like the differences between people and cultures and history and places. And within that path, I started having, I think that a lot of us in kind of like in the holistic spiritual side of things, we do things that we think are, just normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
because that's who we are and that's what we do. But there's also like a shadow aspect of it where
Yeah.
we don't really talk about it freely.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
don't
In
do
fact,
things freely.
and in fact, during part of the journey, at least for me, I didn't even know what shadow work was. I'd never even heard that word before. I think, let's see, I went through spiritual awakening in 2014. So really right before we met, I was still trying to figure things out. And probably the first time I heard of the shadow was probably, I don't know, maybe 2010 or 11, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the thing I find sometimes is like we're not even sure what's causing us issues, or we start thinking there's things going on, but we don't even know what to search for. Like I would
Yeah.
go to Google, or whatever, and try to find answers, but I wouldn't even know what to search for.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that even though it doesn't seem that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, the conversation has radically changed.
Yeah.
Now it's very much more open, and we hear of different modalities, and the creation is kind of like the rise of the woo in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the conversation has really changed within the last, I think, 5 years mostly, and it's going to continue changing. And I believe that more and more people are going to be awakened. I also believe that it's like whether you like it or not, it's happening. So we all have the choice, right? What are we going to do? Are we going to embrace it, or are we going to resist it?
Absolutely, 100%. And when I received my spiritual awakening, I was given some really specific instructions, but yet they were cryptic. They were specific but cryptic. And one of the like the second batch of instructions I received was that I was here to be a lighthouse for the lighthouses. And I was like, well, I'm not really sure what that means. And it's taken all this time sort of put together these puzzle pieces. And that's one of the things I talk to my clients about is all the pieces of your journey is important. Like I was a federal analyst before I went through spiritual awakening. I was a private investigator. So the private investigator skills comes into my work. The analyst skills come into my work. I've always been good at solving puzzles. That comes into my work, and so yeah, it's so interesting when you look back over the journey of this lifetime that you've gone through. All of the pieces were revealing themselves to you, even though they feel like at some points they don't feel like they go together at all, but they actually do.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating because when you go into it, as you were saying, like you really don't know. And there's gonna be things that you like take for granted, and
Yeah.
there's gonna be things that you don't really pay attention to. And the things that are like most, I would say, important maybe, or what's gonna be the catalyst of one of the triggers into your awakening, ascension, whatever you wanna call it, your journey, you are probably gonna resist more than once.
For sure. Yeah.
Until it's gonna come to a point where it's like undeniable. I had an spiritual awakening. I was already, on the path. And I think that it kind of like, for me, I don't have a religion. My parents are from different religions. When they got married, they decided that they were not gonna get their kids into any religion. Therefore, neither me or my siblings had one. And I have, now looking back, I can see how that has played out as well. Because now I help people that comes with like religious conditioning.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I have, I cannot say that I don't have any from this lifetime, at least. I don't think I
Yeah.
have any, but to my surprise, I did discover that I did have some from previous lifetimes. So that was very shocking to me because I was
Yeah.
like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
how, like, how is this happening? But anyways, that's a whole other story. But the triggering for me, one of the triggers, I went through a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And it was the most, it was the craziest thing that it has ever happened to me. It was like there's, when people say like, oh, you're gonna go through like several awakenings. Yes, I do believe that you go through several maybe stages, but your real one, that one, you cannot look back and say that that you can look forward going the same way. You just can't. For me, it was like, I felt like dying, like
Absolutely.
like dying.
Mhm.
That's the only way that I can describe it. I have no control over my body,
Yeah.
my physical body. I had no control of it. It was almost as if the way that my body, my emotions, my thinking were up to that point, it was like the pattern was completely interrupted.
Yeah.
I will cry like for no reason at all whatsoever, or
Yeah.
no apparent reason at all whatsoever. It was like crying, 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 crying. And then I will stop and I was fine. And then out of the blue, I will try to talk and I will start crying again. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like just disclosure, it's like I went to the doctor just to make sure that everything like physically was okay. And, they of course, they did like all sorts of lifestyles, they measure my heart and my pressure and my sugar and anything that you can imagine, because I was like not recognizing the way my body was working at that
Yeah.
time. And the only thing that I could do, I remember I would like, lay in bed and cry. This was like 3 days in a row of the same thing.
Sure.
I was like, the only thing that it came to a point where I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna embrace this, because whatever it is, I know is temporary. Like this is not gonna last, my whole life or whatnot. I'm like, whatever this is, I know is temporary. I just gotta like, lay down and just kind of like let it happen.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like, oh, okay. Then things kind of like started opening up, I would say, like
Yeah.
gifts and, psychic abilities and all kinds of things. But that was like really like a pivotal moment.
Absolutely. I think you're so right on that. When I look back over my life, there were multiple spiritual awakenings, but there was one, the big one that I
Yeah,
call it, that happened in 2014, where it's like there was my life before the awakening, my life after the awakening, and they are not the same. They do not look the same. And as far as Dark Nights of the Soul, I've had many, many, many of those. And in some, conversations, you also go through what's called ego deaths. And a lot of people they find that very scary because they don't know what it is, or that they think the ego is a bad thing. And the ego is not a bad thing. The ego is actually it helps us survive. It helps us to show up. It helps us to be here on camera.
yeah,
It's an important part of who we are. Yet what the awakening does for us is to help us really unbecome who we've been, so that we start to become, it's like you've got to break out of these identities that you were, that no longer fit you anymore. And you go through these could be called, kind of spiritual flu or spiritual sickness. You go through that period, and it feels like I found that my five senses were heightened. Like I had trouble dealing with sound of any kind. I had trouble dealing with lights. And it took quite a long time for me to integrate all that had happened, so that I could actually navigate in the world again. Like it was a very, very interesting time. And in our society, a lot of times people are afraid to tell anyone what they're going through, because people think that they're losing their mind. They think they're losing their mind. And really, you're going through this dramatic shift so that you can step into your higher purpose. And it really is a challenge. What have you found about the healing part of your journey? Can you talk a little bit more about what you've had to go through for the healing part of things?
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of surrendering,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of surrendering,
For sure.
because it's almost like if nothing, I live my life in a very, what I know now to be masculine energy,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
a very, very analytical, a lot of procedures, a lot of strategy, a lot of, following rules. And then, throughout the journey, you discover, okay, like it's so hard for me to just like receive.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
used to like nurturing other people and taking care of, at work, teams, people, projects, whatever, deadlines. And it's been very, very, I think one of the hardest things for me is to like embrace my feminine energy
Yeah.
and the creation part, but not creation under pressure, just creation for bliss and flow, I will
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
um it's been very revealing for me. The other thing that has been very revealing for me is, before I will be like, oh, this is, I think, something that happened. I'm not gonna say that it's the first time that it happened when I have that big like dark night of the soul, the pivotal one, because I can see looking back that this is something that I may like challenge doctors with certain things that were going on with my body,
Yeah.
and they will tell me, well, there's no cure for it, and I will be like, I don't believe that. I believe the body can heal.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm not a doctor. And of course, I don't practice medicine whatsoever. But this is something that, and everybody makes their choices. This is not saying that doctors are not good or anything like that, or that medicine is not good. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that I had to like trust myself more than what a third party was telling me, like the
Yeah.
outside validation.
Yeah.
So I will be like, oh, okay, like it's fine, like I get the news and I get the input, I get the diagnostic, but that doesn't mean to me that that's the final thing for me. So when this big dark night of the soul happened, and I went to the doctor, to get checked and everything, the first reaction was like, you need to go and see a shrink, and we can give you like pills for anxiety, for
Mm-hmm.
kind of like mood controllers, which they may work for a lot of people because they might have a situation or whatnot, and that's perfect.
Yeah.
I knew for me that was not what was going on with me.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, no, absolutely not. And they already kind of knew at my doctor office at the time and point that, this was something with me, like, where they would, they would say something to me and I would be like, well, let me try, like, let me research, let me
Yeah.
see, and then I can go back and make a more educated decision. So that was the first reaction, and after that, I have had like instances where now I take anything that my physical body is telling me as a signaling of
Mm.
something else that might be going on in the background.
Yeah.
My back hurts, and I am like, well, this feels like somebody's backstabbing me.
Mm.
And sure enough, 2-3 days later, I found out about a situation, and I was like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think that I learned through the healing to have the interpretation of how my body is actually signaling me about something that might be going on in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Before my journey happened, I had a spreadsheet of diagnoses and so many prescriptions. I was so sick. And, I went through all these different things. And finally, one day, and again, not advocating that anyone do this, this is just my my path, one day I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. And I stopped everything. And what I had come to was I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I had been looking into the mind-body connection, and I wanted to understand more about that, and which eventually evolved into a lot of the work that I do. My signature process or program is called Unboxing Your Authentic Self. And the first step in that is about the mind-body connection, is to understand what is the body telling me. And I look at the emotions that are underneath that particular thing. And that is how I've done the majority of the healing for myself. And now what I feel like it did, I actually renounced all illnesses. I don't claim any of that. I don't think any about that. Now, not that it magically went away. Some of it did not. However, I'm able to see how much different my health is now than what it was. And I got all medications out of my system, whether they were pharmaceutical or whether they were over the counter, to be able to actually see, okay, what, now that my body is clear, what is it telling me? Where do I need to focus? Because like most people, I would start on some kind of medication, and then that would create a different problem. And then I would be on a different medication. And then one doctor at one point said to me, I was in my 30s, and he said, my God, it's like you're 80 years old with the amount of medications you have. And I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And that was really a catalyst for me into starting to find these different things I'd been through, because I have a history of a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, a lot of loss. I'd been through 30 years of counseling. I ended up getting a master's degree in counseling, just trying to see how I could help myself and help other people. And it was through holistic healing that I actually made all these major changes. I mean, I'm 59 years old now, and I'm doing better now than I have in a long time. And now if something happens, it's right there for me to deal with. I'm not dealing with all this stuff from the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is quite a journey, and it can feel so lonely on this path for people.
Yeah, very much so, because there's a whole, for me at least, this is what I find. And as you're saying, we're not advocating for anyone to go and do this. The only thing that I'm going to advocate for somebody to do is like get to know yourself and listen to yourself. Like,
Absolutely.
my body doesn't work the same as your body or as somebody else's body. My genetics are not the same. My family history is not the same. So, it really goes down to, we need to know ourselves better than anybody. So then we can discern when we get the outside information, like, okay, yes,
For sure.
I'm meant to do this, or no, give me a moment. I need to kind of like think about it, maybe, before making like a major decision. So for me, all of that has like played a role, like my relationship with my own body, my relationship with what I eat, with what I do. It's my body has become, my physical body has become a great like GPS in a way.
100%. Yes. Yes.
Of what might be going on that I'm not talking about, or I'm not, putting like up. I'm internalizing instead of like getting it out.
Yes.
It has become my relationship with myself has become very, very different. Therefore, my relationship with everything and anything and everyone has changed too.
Yeah. Did you find that you had challenges with your family or with your kids as you were going through these changes, kind of understanding what was happening with you? Did they understand? Like, what was happening there?
When that's an interesting question. That's why I say, for everybody, you need to know yourself. And people has the best intentions, and their best intentions may not be the best fit for you.
Right.
So when I went through this whole Dark Night of the Soul episode, the big one, I have always been kind of like the peacemaker, the glue, the one that keeps everybody together in my family, the go-to person, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm usually the one that stabilizes everybody else. When this happened, it came out of the blue, supposedly. It came
Yeah.
out of the blue because
Right.
there were small things and signaling factors that were happening before until one day, you know, my soul was like, okay, you're gonna listen. The best way that please listen to your soul and your spirit, because the best way, if you're not paying attention, the best way for them to get your attention is gonna be to stop you in your tracks. So
That's 100%. I have this analogy that I use like a splinter, you know, and it at first, you know, it doesn't do anything. Then it starts to kind of whisper,
yeah,
then it starts to yell. And if you're not listening or you're not getting the meaning, you will get knocked on your ass.
yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me. So I tell you, it's like when it happened, I was like, it happened at work at the time and point, and I just had to like exit the building.
Yeah.
And I locked myself in my car and I started crying uncontrollably for no reason whatsoever. And I just called my supervisor from the car and I was like, I cannot go back in. I can't.
Yeah.
And I was driving back home and I had a voice note somewhere where I recorded myself saying, because I was like, you know, I'm going to forget about this. No, you don't forget about it. But at the time and point, I was like, maybe I'll forget about this
Yeah.
moment. I want to remember this moment.
Right.
And I said to myself in a voice note, this is for anyone that is not listening to their soul. If you don't listen, they're going to make you listen in
Yeah.
the most uncomfortable way.
Most
like,
uncomfortable.
you
Yeah.
better listen to the little, you know, nudges that they're sending you, because if not, it's gonna become a huge thing. But anyway, going back to it, when this happened, my mom will come home and my sister will come home, and they were trying to logically piece it together, right? Like,
Yeah.
what happened? Like, did you have a fight with so and so? Did
Right.
somebody tell you? Did something happen at work? Did you know, at that time and point I was no longer with my husband, then, you know, the father of my kids. So it was like, oh, did you have like a conflict with him? Did you have a conflict with somebody else that maybe, you know, we are like, I don't know, maybe started dating, or
Right.
you know, what happened at work? I had a very stressful job. You know, anything and everything that you can imagine, they try to piece together, because it was like very unlike me.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing that would prompt for this episode to happen.
Yeah.
And it just came. And it came like hardcore. It wasn't like, oh, you know, I'm not feeling well, let me cry a little bit. It was like, I was wiped out.
Yeah.
Out. And then it came, it took time to come out of it, right? Of course, it wasn't like, oh, 3 days and, you know, on the fourth day I was shiny and bright and happy, you know,
Exactly.
it's a process, because even though you have to keep on, life goes on and you have to, you know, continue living, there's a lot of processing internally, because we also try to give everything meaning and validation, right?
Yeah.
So, and most times that this happens, you don't really understand what's going on.
Not at all. And it's really hard to, and then if you attempt to talk to someone and they don't get it, or their idea of it is completely off base for you, then you start feeling like you don't have anyone to talk to. So you stop talking to people about what's going on. I know even as an entrepreneur, I've had people say, well, you know, go where your people hang out. And I said, that's the thing. My people aren't talking about this to anyone. My people have stopped talking to people about how they're feeling, because people think they're nuts. And so they are going through this alone, and they really are hiding in plain sight, because they're listening for someone who can understand what they're going through. Because I feel like anyone listening to our conversation today may be exactly in the space that we've both been in before.
Yeah. And it's very hard, because you feel very misunderstood. And as I'm saying, you know, people do have the best intentions, but there's no base, there's no really understanding what's going on from the place that you are at that very moment.
Right.
So And that has happened to me, like, you know, if you are a person, I believe that everybody has gifts, right? But
Of course.
whether you're going to use it or not using them, that's a whole other conversation. But for people that do have gifts and they are completely out of tune with this may be a gift and not something else,
Yeah.
you may purely think you're going nuts. Like you are going to think you're going crazy.
Now that you're where you are, when you think back long before your awakening, do you see where spirit was trying to give you nudges for a long time before you actually went through your awakening?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm thinking back, I went to work, one of my very first big jobs. I worked for the Internal Revenue Service. I went to work there when I was 18 years old. Like this is a big job, right? I was a
Yeah.
teen mom and went from working retail to working there. And I remember that it was a great job. I had great people. I loved the people I worked with, but it felt out of alignment to who I was, even though I didn't know that term then. I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
But I remember one day I was typing seizure papers, and this is before we had computers. I had a typewriter. I
Yeah.
was typing for them to seize a property, someone who had
Right.
not paid taxes. And the property was a daycare. And I'm typing and I'm just crying and crying. And they said, and my friend said, what is the matter with you? And I said, well, you're going to close this daycare. And I'm just having all kinds of feelings about that. And they said, well, they took money from their employees and then did not turn it over. And I said, I get that. I said, but there are little kids who are there that this is maybe a comforting place for them, and their mom has picked this place. And I went through and they said, you're hopeless,
Yeah.
and they all teased me because I had this soft heart, right? And then I would literally physically throw up every Sunday before I had to go back to work that next week. And I was like, what is wrong with me? I just need to suck it up and just keep doing this. Well, I did that for 10 years and I ended up quitting, going to work at a video store, like a convenience store for like $5 an hour. And people thought, what in the world? So I separated from the government, then I went back, then I separated again, and I went back because logic kept telling me that's what I needed to do. And I ended up with 20 years in the government. And eventually I just became numb on the inside. I just ignored what my body was telling me, which is how I ended up getting so sick. I did it in jobs, I did it in relationships, I did it in friendships, I did it in just completely ignoring what was happening in my body when I was involved in these certain things.
Yeah.
And that was going on for years.
Absolutely.
For years before I ever really got it.
Yeah, I think that most of us, it can be going on for your whole lifetime, really. And you don't think that that thing that you're doing is special. You don't think that those signals that your body is giving you are really trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
Because we are very conditioned to think that this is what we gotta do. For us women is usually, okay, you need to be a good girl. That's a whole other thing too.
Yeah.
I have that, like I always been a good girl. And I don't know if that like really, I'm not gonna say that it paid off, right? But is that really who I was supposed to be? Or is that really what I was telling or I was being told that I needed to be,
Yeah.
Like I always been a good student. I always been, like I always went by the book. I don't break the rules. And then all of a sudden you go to this phase that you're hanging out, I don't know, with the not so good kids. And it's like, okay, what is going on? It's like rebellion phase. That's what we usually say.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's not really what's going on.
Yeah.
But that's the path. And then, you get a job, or you date people, you get a husband, you get kids, and then that's pretty much it. Like you may have a career or not, and that's it. Then your kids go, and that's the, that's the trajectory, I think, that most of us are told. Well, of course there are variants, right? Depending on culture, depending on where you're from, depending on your family,
Right.
depending on many things, but that's usually the trajectory. And when you start doing stuff that is not supposed to be in your trajectory, whatever that is for you,
Yeah,
it's kind of like a rebellious act. It seems like a rebellious act.
it does.
But
Yeah.
maybe it's not. Maybe that's your essence. Maybe that's really what you were supposed to be doing all along.
Well, and what I found on mine is that as a small child, now again, trauma and abuse started very, very early in my life, but as a little small child, what I knew always was that I was here to make a difference. This is just something I knew. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to do that. And I had a certain connection with people, and I could see people in a way that other people didn't see them, and I could hear things they were saying that other people were missing.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize those were gifts, and I didn't realize what that meant for me, and so I wasn't allowed to be rebellious anyway. That's a bigger story too. My life
Yeah.
started kind of
Yeah.
spinning out of control after that, and I've had 3 failed marriages, lots of failed relationships. So in 2017, I went into a path of celibacy. So there's been no dating, no anything. And for me, that was a space for me to clear more clutter out of my life, figure out who am I.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm meant to have another relationship in this lifetime, and if I don't, that's okay. But if I do, I know that person will have done their work,
Yeah.
and we will come together in that time. The
Yeah.
other point that I've seen that's changed a lot, and your kids are a lot younger than mine. How old are your kids now?
15 and 13.
15 and 13. Okay, mine are like 41 and 35. So my kids are much older now, but they are um now they are starting to see what my life has evolved in, and now they're starting to listen more to what I'm saying. And because I'm not really teaching them directly. I mean, I am, but I'm not, but it's more they're seeing what my life has changed and how becoming more connected with who I am, who I truly am, and how much happier I am in life. And it's so interesting because even though we've gone through what we've gone through, I find that I can still get caught up in things that I'm not here to do sometimes, like maybe it's work or maybe it's a conversation or whatever. And then I'll notice my body starts feeling out of whack again. And I go, okay, let me tune in to what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so how did you find making these transitions from like regular jobs to being an entrepreneur?
It's not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah,
It's not easy.
it's
That's for
not easy.
especially because I think for a lot of us, and I still have, sometimes trouble with this, like it's hard to quantify what you do.
Yes,
It's hard to quantify what you do. And because most of us are in the field or the service of people, it's even
absolutely.
harder because you want to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And by helping everybody, it's hard to say, oh, I can help you with this and this and this and this and this, and
For
say,
sure.
okay, but can you help me with this and that? I know something that it takes, I guess, like trial and error sometimes, because I know I I prefer to work with women. It's not that I don't work with men, but like 99.9999% of the time is women.
Yeah.
The times that I have tried to work with men, it wasn't a good outcome because I think they get other ideas, and that's not, the idea of me, trying to help you. So yeah, I rather work with women. But anyways, it's hard to quantify what you do, and not only what you do, but the people that you really want to work with sometimes.
Yeah.
So
It's like so many things. I find that sometimes it's much easier to figure out what you don't want or who
yeah,
you don't want to work with,
yeah,
because that's when we're attempting to get clarity, I find, on whatever it is,
yeah,
whether it's a client, whether it's a job, whether
yeah,
it's a relationship, whatever. Sometimes it's so much easier to start with what we don't want so
yeah,
that we can start to get more and more clear on who we do want.
yeah,
I have found that I love working with both men and women. I would say for the most part, women are usually the ones who reach out to me. I've had a few men. I find men who were raised by women often are the ones who seem drawn to me a lot of
yeah,
times. They oftentimes have some trouble maybe relating to other males because they maybe do have more emotions, or they're more in touch with their
yeah,
sensitivities and emotions and things like that. And so, because I've also had strong masculine energy in my life, a lot of times males are drawn to me because um, they know that they're safe with me. And I think a lot of people have that.
yeah,
And it's so important. I look at it as a vibration, as a frequency, in that I don't believe in competition. Um,
right,
I believe that, say, for you, you have a particular frequency to your voice, to your work, to what you do,
yeah,
and there are people who are going to be specifically tuned into what you do, and the same for me. And someone may hear you say something and it not resonate. They may hear me something and it resonates completely, or
yeah,
the other way around, and we may be saying the exact same thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's absolutely true.
yeah,
Absolutely true. The way that we vibe is a real thing. Like
for
I always
sure.
say, energy doesn't lie. Like
It does not lie. It
it,
does
it
not
doesn't.
lie.
You can be telling me whatever, you can be showing me whatever. If I'm not vibing with it, I don't care what it is. It's like I'm out. It's
Well, and that's a great point. And a lot of people who don't even understand energy, a good reference for them might be when you walk in a room, sometime maybe you don't know anyone in there and it looks fine, it looks normal, and maybe you start to head over and sit down and something stops you and you go, nope, I'm gonna go this way.
yeah,
That's energy. That's
yeah,
you tuning in for just a little bit and saying, oh, I don't think that's the right way for me.
yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and so important to hear that and feel that, I think.
It's a journey. That's all I can say. Maybe 10 years ago, I would not imagine that I would be talking about energy and vibration and frequency and different realms and entities and guides and spirits and all of the things that are very much like everyday thing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
They were not, that was not part of the plan at all.
Not part of our human plan anyway.
Right? Maybe it was part of the human plan just, to experience that so I can help other people.
Yeah,
But it was not like the plan that I guess that everybody kind of like plan out for me.
right. For sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there has been a lot of embracing, a lot of surrendering, a lot of just like, let it happen, let it flow.
Well, really, and you mentioned having trouble receiving earlier. Boy,
Yeah,
that was something I had a lot of trouble with too. And you know, there's a lot of talk around people getting out of their comfort zone. Well, for me, speaking to anyone, a group especially, or being on camera or anything like that, as a child, I was terrified, like, and even up through adult, like, I wouldn't talk to people like I'm
Yeah,
talking to you now on Zoom, and it's going to be on video. I would have never done that. Like, that was terrifying to me. But what I found was that, for me, actually, comfort zone is often receiving. It is often, or being unable to receive. I spent so much of my life in very, very uncomfortable situations
yeah,
that sometimes for me to allow myself to be comforted or to be comfortable is
yeah,
actually uncomforting or
yeah,
is uncomfortable, you know? So it's
yeah,
like the opposite for a lot of people. And I think that's important too, to be able to have that time to just explore what it is for you,
yeah,
because you are so unique and not like any other person out there. That's why it's so valuable
yeah,
to gather all this, to gather all that you can, all this wisdom about who you are, because it also helps you connect and relate and make a big difference in this
yeah,
world.
yeah. It's definitely interesting, an interesting thing, you know, like now many things can happen in life or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, you know, it's fine. Like I have a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
Uh, I have this absolutely like 3000% trust in this invisible guidance system that I own for myself. And
Yeah.
it may not be logic, it may not make sense. Um, but the times that I have not followed it has not been good for me. So now it's like, oh, okay, I gotta, you know, I just gotta like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why it's happening, you know, I don't know why am I being shown this or that, or why did I hear this on that? And, you know, I just gotta go with it. And that also goes to me, you know, I get like very like cryptic messages, as you were saying, you know,
Yes.
it's like, what is this? And then maybe I just know that I just gotta like receive it. That's just my only thing. Even for clients, you know, when I do readings or whatnot, things that to me make absolutely no sense or whatnot, it's like, okay, I just gotta receive it and I just gotta say it as it is because it truly means something for the other person. But it's very weird sometimes, like at first when you don't really know, as I'm saying, you know, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it was like, why am I being shown this? And maybe, you know, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 6 months later, it was like, oh,
There it is. Well, you know, and I
oh,
think a good point to this is something that I think really isn't touched on too much, but I know people have this question. And that question would be, how do you know when it's spirit versus something else? Whether it's your own subconscious, whether it's your own limiting beliefs, whether it's something sinister or dark.
yeah.
For you, how do you know when it's spirit, when it's your actual guidance?
For me, it has taken a while, right, to discern like what's what, right?
What?
And sometimes it can be scary because you don't know. I'm very visual, and sometimes I at first when I haven't like started like my clairvoyance, I will say will really start like fine tune. Because I probably always had it, but you know, I totally disregarded it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like starting to see, no pun intended there, but
Yeah.
starting to see like not with my eyes, but really with my third eye.
Hmm.
I feel that it's coming like from the back of my head instead like from the front of my head.
Yeah.
It's a very different experience for me, like imagining something, you know, if I say, oh, I want to imagine, I don't know, a white elephant, you know, like posing on a flower.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I am making that against like if I actually get to kind of like see it projected from the back of my head. That's the way that it feels to me. But at first, I was like, oh, you know, I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Making this up. The first time that I actually knew that I could see for other people or in other people's energy fields or whatnot, because I have clairvoyance, was because when I will go into deep meditation, I will see birds on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a bird person in this lifetime. I am
Yeah.
not. A
Yeah.
bird is like probably the last animal that I will think about, right? But I learned to know that when I was seeing birds on the other side, they all had a meaning. And I was doing I was reading somebody's field, and all of a sudden I see an owl coming flying. And I am like, hold on 1 second. And I was like, is it my owl? Like what is this owl doing in a body scan in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I said, this is, I told the person, I said, I usually see birds, but like, this is the first time that I get to see it in another person. I know this bird is not mine. Like, it's yours. I could feel it. It wasn't mine.
Yeah.
So when we come back from the reading, like when we like, you know, center here and we are talking about the session and whatnot, she was like, oh my gosh, she said, you creep me out. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because last night I asked the universe for a sign if I was on the right path or whatever. She's like, and my sign is usually whatever she told me at the time, let's say seahorses, you know, like something that had nothing to do. She was like, and I asked last night, like, you know, if I'm really on the right path, I asked the universe to send me an owl. And I was like, oh my God. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, there's something here, you
Yeah.
know, like there's really something here. And it has happened like multiple times, you know. Now that was the first like time that I was like, okay. And then I kind of like, you know, started like when I'm connecting with people energetically and I see things, now I know that it's not mine. I can feel it.
Love that. I love that. Yeah. And we all, and that's the thing, you have these different gifts. I've got several gifts. My primary, the ones that really stand out, I have clairsentience. So I have a clear sensing and clear cognizance, a clear knowing. And those are the ones that are the most prominent. I get a type of tingle sensation that happens throughout my body. And for me, one of the best ways for me to know when I'm receiving spirit guidance, other those that are very dramatic like that,
Yeah.
is that it's not something harmful. It's
Yeah.
not something that says, you know, you see in movies where, oh, well, you know, God told me or spirit told me, the voices told me to do this harmful thing to this person. No, it's not that. That is not God. That is not spirit.
Yeah.
That is not your higher self.
Yeah.
Another thing that, or harming yourself in some way. No, no,
Yeah.
no, that's not it either. And to know if it's like old programming or something, first of all, it's going to be, when you're getting something, it's going to be something that is positive or that is neutral.
Yeah.
So that's not considered positive or negative, kind of like the owl, you
Yeah.
know, showing up. It's something that is there for guidance, you know, the GPS system. I use that analogy too, or like your compass to help you. And oftentimes it's cryptic. Like I've used this analogy before. I had made an appointment for my daughter to do to have a reading with a particular medium. And I had explained to her ahead of time, I said, you could go see 3 different mediums and they may all get the same symbol, but it's going to be something different. So I said, maybe this medium number one, maybe they all get the symbol of a rainbow as an example. And medium number one, or a rainbow to her, might be like leprechauns, like rainbow, you know, pot of gold or whatever. Another one might see it as gay pride, like there might be something
Yeah.
there. There's I think it's a church group maybe called Rainbow Girls,
Yeah.
someone else might see that. And so it takes their wisdom and their knowledge to bring that to you in a way that's going to make sense, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And that's the thing I think some people get confused about when someone, let's say, is clairvoyant.
Yeah.
I think they think that you see this like you're watching TV,
Right.
like it's this clear, like you're watching a movie, and it's not that way at all.
It's
Not that
not.
way at all.
It's
Yeah.
not at all. And not only it's not that way at all, depending on who you are connecting with or whatever type of reading you're doing, it happens very fast. And it's like one thing
Yeah.
after the other. And you kind of like gotta make sense of what you are seeing, feeling, sometimes hearing, whatever your gifts are and how developed or not they may be, or how in tune you are with them. Because I think they are super developed for everybody. It's just that they are, like dormant. So it's very, and the other thing that I have found is like people needs to be ready to receive it.
Yeah.
People needs to be ready to hear it, because I have had an instance when I was like reading for somebody, and the message was all along, no matter what symbols I saw, no matter whatever past life in this person I got to see, it was always about a very like prominent male figure in her life, controlling her, like not letting her be who she's supposed to be, and her kind of like had to like cut ties and run away in order to be who she's meant to be, right? This came out in symbols, in spirit animals, in a past life, like it was like a whole combo of things going on. I come back because I come back and I'm talking throughout the reading, but I'm telling her, and this person is looking at me like if I told her something crazy. And I am like, what's going on? I can tell, I can tell
Yeah.
when somebody's resonating and somebody is not. And I'm not gonna let you go until I find out what's going on, because that's what I do, So I'm like, and most times you don't even have to tell me, because I'm seeing these patterns, right? In whatever way they are being presented to me, but I'm seeing them. And she's like, nothing resonated. And I'm like, nothing resonated. And I'm like, and I said, okay. I said, you have to take into account that sometimes, like I am shown whatever it is that you need to hear. And I said, and sometimes it may take a while for this message to kind of like make sense to you.
Right.
I am being shown today, and maybe this makes sense, 3 months from now.
Exactly.
But I am being shown like it's in your energy field. This is what's going on. And then we kept on talking, and she tells me that she broke off from a toxic relationship like 2 weeks ago or something like that. And I am like, you may have cut ties physically with this person. I said, he's still all over your energy field.
Yeah.
Like, there's work that you still gotta do here. Like you may not be seeing the person, but and of course, when you're breaking up with somebody, it's not like, okay, we're done and we're done, right? It's like there's a lot of emotion and stuff happening. So you gotta be ready to absorb, what you're being given too sometimes.
For sure. When I first started doing toe readings, this was, oh, I don't know. It was probably 2015, 20-ish, probably maybe 2014. I don't know. But I was very unsure of what I was doing or anything else. And I was looking at this woman's feet. I was sitting at her feet, and I was looking at her feet, and I was, had my hands on her feet. And um so I started getting a tickle in my throat, and I started coughing, and that was kind of unusual for me, like wasn't something I did. And I had been asking her, and everything was fine with her, no problem, live this happy life, blah blah blah. Okay. So I kept seeing in her toes, it gave me the feeling that about 7 years ago, something had gone on. And and she said, no, married my husband, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. And I said, well, did you have anything medical going on? Because I'm just getting this weird cough. She goes, no. And it's like she just wasn't connecting with anything
Yeah.
that I was saying. And I thought, well, I must be getting it wrong, is what I thought. And I kept talking to her, and pretty soon her eyes filled up with tears. And I said, what happened? What's the matter? And she said, I wanted to be a doctor, she said, and he blocked me from doing that. And she said, and I've never gotten over it. And I just kept wanting to do this. And she said, so what you've said now, I'm going to look back into this. And she cried and hugged me. And it was just like this weird little, what felt like nothing thing to me. And so, yeah, I mean, it was just, you just don't know. You just don't know. And we are here to help people, and my work is definitely a lot more along the lines of like coaching and education and things like that. But we all have a different way of showing up and how these messages come to us and come through us.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, anything else? I think we've had such a great chat today. Anything else that's on your mind before we end today's conversation?
Just message to people, just trust yourself and trust, what you are feeling and seeing and being given, because it is there for a reason.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrea, for taking time to have a conversation with me today for the holistic pathway. This is a new thing that I'm doing, and I will put information in the description if people want to reach out to you. And thank you so much for meeting with me today, and I'll talk with you soon.
Thank you for having me.